She bought the 1,965 Ford Mustang for pennies, believing it to be just another rusted relic gathering dust in a forgotten corner. But as the engine roared back to life, something under the passenger seat made her tremble. What started as a simple project soon became a journey that would uncover the hidden secrets of the Mustang's past and lead her to a discovery that would change her life forever. Before we dive into this incredible journey, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode uncovers even more shocking secrets you won't want to miss. The sun had barely broken through the early morning mist when the flatbed truck arrived, its tires crunching over the gravel of the mechanic's small, cluttered shop. Tasha Evans stood outside, wiping the sleep from her eyes with the back of her hand. She had been up late the night before, working on a vintage Jeep she'd promised to restore for a local farmer. The shop's fluorescent lights flickered above, casting a tired glow across the cracked pavement of her humble garage. A forgotten relic from a time when the world had more faith in hard work than fast fixes. Tasha had always been drawn to the rusted, the abandoned, and the broken. They were like her, faded but still alive, waiting for someone to breathe new life into them. She'd grown up here, learning the ins and outs of mechanics from her father, who had run the shop before her. When he passed, it hadn't taken long for her to take over, despite doubts from some. But Tasha didn't mind. Her hands, stained with grease and old engine fluid, had always been more familiar to her than anything else. Today was no different, or so she thought. The Mustang sat on the flatbed like a forgotten dream, its body covered in dust and grime, the paint long gone, replaced by a dull rusted brown that seemed to absorb all the light around it. The windows were cracked, the tires barely holding air. The car wasn't much to look at, but to Tasha, it was everything. A 1,965 Ford Mustang. She hadn't been expecting something this classic, this rare to land in her shop. The guy who'd sold it to her had mentioned it briefly, telling her it had been sitting for years, just gathering dust behind a barn. He hadn't expected anyone to actually buy it, but Tasha hadn't hesitated. There was something in her gut that told her this car wasn't just a project. It was a story waiting to be told. She helped the driver unload the Mustang, her eyes scanning every inch. The door panels were dented, the seats torn to shreds, and the engine bay looked like something had taken a bite out of it. Yet, Tasha saw more than just the decay. She saw the potential, the life still clinging to the bones of the car. The Mustang wasn't just metal. It was a memory, a chapter of someone's life, tucked away beneath layers of neglect. The driver backed the flatbed out of the way, leaving Tasha alone with the car. She ran her hand over the hood, the cool metal beneath her fingertips sending a shiver up her spine. There was something about this car that pulled at her, something that felt almost familiar. She wasn't sure why, but she couldn't shake the feeling. "Let's see what you've got," she murmured to the Mustang as she grabbed her toolbox from the bench. She set to work, her mind already racing through the possibilities of what this car could become. The smell of oil and old leather filled the shop, mingling with the faint scent of memories that clung to the Mustang like a shadow. Hours passed, and Tasha found herself lost in the rhythm of her work. Every bolt she turned, every piece she removed, only revealed more of the car's hidden history. Beneath the layers of dirt and neglect, the Mustang was more than just a forgotten machine. It was a relic, a piece of the past, full of untold stories. But there was one part of the car she hadn't yet explored, under the passenger seat. She paused, wiping sweat from her brow. Her fingers hovered over the seat's edges, the thought of what might be hidden there dancing in her mind. Without much hesitation, she slid the seat forward, revealing the floor beneath. And there, tucked into the corner, was something that didn't belong. A small, weathered box, its edges frayed and chipped with age. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but she felt a deep sense of urgency. The box seemed to pulse, with a story she hadn't yet discovered. She reached for it, her fingers trembling as she carefully lifted it from the floor. What was inside would change everything. Tasha sat back on her heels, the small, weathered box resting in her lap. It was heavier than she expected, the metal clinking faintly as if something inside was moving. She stared at it for a long moment, almost as if waiting for it to speak to her. The garage around her was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the Mustang's body settling. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, and for a brief second, the world outside the walls of her shop seemed to fade away. It was just her, the car, and the box. With a slow, deliberate motion, she peeled off the worn electrical tape that had once sealed it shut. Inside, nestled between old newspaper clippings, was a small leather-bound journal. The pages were yellowed, the ink smudged in places, but there was no mistaking what it was. A record, perhaps a diary of someone's life. Someone who had once loved this Mustang. Someone whose story was now tangled up in the car's own. Tasha's heart quickened. She couldn't explain why, but she felt an overwhelming urge to read it. She flipped open the journal carefully, the pages crackling in protest. The first entry was dated the 5th of June 1965, the day the Mustang was born. It wasn't much, just a few sentences about the excitement of bringing the car home, the new car smell, and the promise of long summer drives. But it was enough. The words felt real, like they were speaking directly to her. She read on, each entry more intimate than the last. The writer, Caleb Rhodes, talked about the pride of working on the car with his father, the late nights spent tinkering under the hood, and the dreams they shared for the car's future. Tasha could practically hear the joy in Caleb's words, feel the sweat and grease of those summer nights spent bringing the Mustang back to life. But then, the entries took a darker turn. A mention of a trip to Vietnam. The car, abandoned for a time, left in the hands of a grieving father who never quite recovered from the loss. Tasha's chest tightened. She could feel the weight of those words, the grief that poured from them, the longing to return to something as simple as working on an old car with his father. The last entry was dated 2004, the year Caleb had died. His father, Benjamin, had continued to care for the Mustang, though it had been stored away in a barn, forgotten by all but him. Tasha's breath caught in her throat. She slowly closed the journal, her hands trembling. This car wasn't just a project. It was a legacy, a father's love, a son's final wishes. The Mustang had been more than a car to Caleb and his father. It had been a bond, a way for them to communicate when words failed. And now, here she was, holding that same Mustang, ready to bring it back to life. Her eyes moved to the workbench where the rest of the journal's contents lay. There were blueprints, handwritten notes, and photos of Caleb and his father, working side by side. The photos were black and white, faded at the edges, but the smiles were clear. They were a team, and this car was their masterpiece. Tasha swallowed hard. She wasn't just fixing a car. She was stepping into a story, one that was as much about love and loss as it was about grease and metal. She closed the box and set it aside, staring at the Mustang. The car that had once held so much meaning for someone was now hers. It was as if fate had brought them together. With a deep breath, Tasha picked up her tools again. The day was far from over, and she had work to do. But this time, it wasn't just about getting the Mustang running again. It was about doing justice to its history. She would honor Caleb and his father, not by just fixing the car, but by bringing it back the way it was meant to be. Her hands moved with more purpose now, the Mustang feeling less like a rusted relic and more like a promise she had to keep. The next few days passed in a blur of work, dust, and steady progress. Tasha's hands had become familiar with every inch of the Mustang, its broken frame, its old wiring, the stubborn rust that clung to every surface. It was slow work, but every day brought her closer to something she couldn't quite define. Something bigger than just restoring a car. The deeper she dug, the more she felt like she was uncovering a part of herself she hadn't known was missing. She spent her mornings in the shop, her afternoons diving into the journal. Caleb's words had stayed with her, echoing in her mind as she worked. The car was more than just metal and parts. It was a conversation between a father and son. Every inch she cleaned, every bolt she tightened, felt like she was becoming a part of that story. On the third night, after hours of grinding and sanding, Tasha found herself once again sitting in the driver's seat of the Mustang. The car was far from finished, but already it felt different. The interior was stripped clean, the seats were pulled out, and the floorboard had been sanded smooth. The steering wheel creaked as she turned it, imagining what it might have been like when Caleb had driven it for the first time. As her fingers brushed the edge of the dashboard, something shifted under her touch. A small, hidden compartment, a latch, tucked behind a panel, clicked open. Tasha froze. She hadn't noticed it before. She pried open the small compartment with care, and inside, there was something unexpected. A letter. It was folded neatly, the edges worn from age. The paper had yellowed and softened, but the ink was still legible. She could tell from the handwriting that it was Caleb's, though this letter felt different from the others. The words on the page weren't the same youthful optimism. This letter was heavier, filled with a weight that made Tasha's chest tighten. With trembling hands, she unfolded the letter, her heart racing. The first sentence caught her breath. "If you're reading this, then I guess the car has passed on to someone new." Tasha swallowed hard, her eyes scanning the rest of the letter. Caleb's words were heartfelt, almost like a final message, as if he knew he might not make it back from Vietnam. He spoke of his father, of the bond they shared through the Mustang, and how, despite the car's eventual decline, it had always been a piece of him, a symbol of hope, a dream. The letter grew darker as she read on. Caleb spoke of his time in the war, his struggles to find peace with the ghosts that haunted him, and his desire to one day finish the Mustang to restore it to the beauty it once had, not just for himself, but for his father. But the letter ended on a somber note. "I never got the chance to finish what I started, but I hope the next person who comes across this car will not just restore it to factory, but make it their own. This car saved me once, and I hope it can do the same for you." Tasha's hands shook as she folded the letter back up. The emotion that flooded her was overwhelming sadness, awe, but also a deep sense of responsibility. She wasn't just working on a car anymore. She was working on a legacy. The Mustang was more than just metal. It was Caleb's story, his life, his unfinished dream. She set the letter aside, her mind reeling. What had started as a simple restoration had turned into something much bigger, something that meant more than she could have ever anticipated. She glanced at the walls of the shop, the shelves lined with parts, tools, and half-finished projects. None of them had ever felt this important. As she looked back at the car, now taking shape, she understood. The Mustang was never just about the car. It was about everything Caleb had poured into it. His love for his father, his hope for a future, and his unfinished business. Tasha stood up, her resolve hardening like steel. She wasn't just going to fix this car. She was going to finish what Caleb had started. She was going to honor his legacy and, in the process, perhaps find something she had been searching for all along. The days blurred into one another as Tasha worked on the Mustang, each turn of the wrench, each polish of the metal feeling more like a personal mission than a job. But now, with Caleb's letter weighing heavily on her mind, she knew she had to learn more. She needed to understand the full story behind this car, the man who had loved it, the bond it had forged, and the ghosts it carried. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Caleb's story. The letter had been cryptic in parts, especially the mention of Vietnam and the unfinished nature of his restoration. Who was Caleb really? What had happened to him? Why had the car been abandoned for so long? Tasha knew that the town of Glenfield had its secrets, like most small towns did. But it also had its people who remembered the past, even when the present seemed to move too quickly to care. She wasn't sure where to start, but she had to try. The Mustang had connected her to something greater than herself, and she couldn't let it slip through her fingers without knowing its full history. The following morning, she drove into town. It was a quiet place, where everyone knew everyone, and most people had stories that were waiting to be told. She headed straight for the local diner, where the old-timers sat on the worn stools and chatted about everything from the weather to the best fishing spots. It was a good place to start. She slipped into a booth near the back, where a waitress with graying hair and a warm smile approached her. "What can I get you, hon?" she asked, her pen poised above her notepad. Tasha hesitated, then smiled back. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me. I'm looking for some information on a guy named Caleb Rodas. You remember him?" The waitress paused, her hand dropping to her side. Her eyes softened. "Caleb," she said quietly. "I remember him well. Used to come in here with his dad, Ben. They were a pair, always talking about cars, working on cars. That boy loved that Mustang. Spent every summer of his life fixing it up with Ben." Tasha leaned forward, her interest piqued. "What happened to him?" The waitress looked away for a moment, her gaze distant. "Well, Caleb, he went off to Vietnam. His dad was proud of him, but we all knew he wasn't coming back the same. Not after what he saw. He came back. But he wasn't the same boy we all knew. His dad kept the Mustang all those years. I think he couldn't bring himself to touch it after Caleb left. Just let it sit there behind the barn, collecting dust." Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. It wasn't just the car that had been abandoned. It was Caleb's spirit, his dreams, his unfinished work, and now it was in her hands. "So, what happened to Caleb?" The waitress took a deep breath. "He didn't make it back from the war. The army said he was MIA, but Ben never believed it. He always thought Caleb was out there somewhere, lost in the jungle. But the truth was, Caleb came back to Glenfield, just not the way any of us expected. Ben never talked about it much. He didn't have to. The Mustang was his way of holding on to Caleb." Tasha sat back, digesting the information. Caleb had never truly come home. His father had kept the Mustang, waiting for his son's return, but it had never happened. The car, once a symbol of hope and father-son bonding, had become a symbol of loss, of something unfinished. The waitress brought over a cup of coffee, placing it in front of Tasha with a quiet smile. "You're doing something good with that car," she said, her voice soft. "I can see it. You're giving it life again, just like Caleb and Ben always wanted." Tasha smiled, her heart heavy but determined. "I'm going to finish what they started. I promise." As she left the diner, the weight of the town's memories pressed down on her. Caleb's story wasn't just about a car, it was about a legacy that had been abandoned, much like the Mustang itself. But now, Tasha was in a position to restore it, to bring both the car and the memory back to life. She drove back to the shop in silence, the sound of the engine humming beneath her. When she pulled up to the garage, the Mustang was waiting for her, its rusted body gleaming in the late afternoon light. Tasha's fingers brushed the edge of the car's door, feeling the history beneath her touch. It wasn't just a car, it was a bridge between the past and the future, and it was hers to restore. She had a story to finish, one that would give Caleb and his father the closure they had never gotten. Tasha's hands were stained with oil and grease as she worked late into the night, the soft hum of the Mustang's engine filling the quiet of the shop. The restoration was coming together piece by piece. Each bolt, each wrenching twist of her hands felt like she was stitching together the fragments of a broken past, one she'd only just begun to understand. The more she worked, the more she became convinced that the Mustang wasn't just another car. It was a portal to the past, to Caleb and his father. Their love for this car, the hours they spent side by side fixing and rebuilding it, had somehow found its way to her. She didn't know how, but she felt it in every fiber of her being. The Mustang was a bridge between generations, between lives lost and memories cherished. That evening, as she carefully worked on the engine block, a familiar sound broke her concentration, the soft ping of the shop door opening. Tasha didn't look up at first. She was used to people stopping by, whether for a quick repair or a random question about the car. But this time, the air felt different, heavier. "Evening," a voice called from the doorway, deep and steady. Tasha froze, her hand still on the wrench. It wasn't the voice of someone passing by, it was the voice of someone who belonged here. She slowly turned, her heart beating in her chest, as she saw the figure standing in the doorway. It was Benjamin Rodas, Caleb's father. He looked as though time had barely touched him, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a leather jacket that had seen better days. His face was weathered, his eyes shadowed with years of unspoken grief. But there was something in his gaze, something that softened when it landed on the Mustang. "You've been busy," Benjamin said quietly, his voice a mix of admiration and something deeper, something harder to name. Tasha didn't know what to say at first. Words seemed insufficient. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the silence between them heavy with years of loss and unspoken history. "I didn't expect you to come by," Tasha finally said, wiping her hands on a rag and standing up from the workbench. "I didn't know if you wanted to see the car again." Benjamin stepped into the shop, his eyes never leaving the Mustang. "I didn't think I'd be able to," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I haven't been able to touch it since he went off to war. But now, seeing you here, working on it, I think maybe it's time." Tasha nodded, not sure if she should speak. Benjamin had been a part of Caleb's life, the man who had raised him, worked on this car with him, and lost him. What could she say to someone who had carried that burden for so long? "I know this car means a lot to you," Tasha said, her voice gentle. "But it's more than just a car to me now, too. It's a piece of Caleb. I can feel him in it. I'm not just fixing the metal. I'm restoring something that was lost, something I think both of us need." Benjamin finally turned to look at her, his eyes searching hers for a long moment. Then, with a quiet nod, he spoke again. "I believe you," he said softly. "Caleb would have wanted someone like you to finish what he started. He didn't get the chance to, but I think he knew he'd never be the only one who loved that car. He always talked about it, about how it was the one thing he and I really understood, the one thing we didn't need words for." Tasha felt her throat tighten. She'd heard the stories in the diner, but hearing it from Benjamin made it real. Caleb's love for the Mustang wasn't just a project, it was a language, a conversation between father and son, one that had been left unfinished. Benjamin took a step closer to the car, his rough fingers brushing the hood, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "When Caleb was building this car, we didn't always talk about everything, but we didn't need to. This car was our way of understanding each other." Tasha's heart ached. There was so much love in that statement, so much regret, and so much healing still to be done. "I can't promise it will ever be the same," Benjamin said, his voice steady but soft. "But maybe, just maybe, this car can help us both find a way back to what we lost." Tasha looked at the Mustang, the broken body that had once held so much promise. Now, it was something different, a symbol of restoration, not just of metal, but of everything it had carried with it. And in this moment, Tasha realized something that had been building inside her for days. She wasn't just restoring a car. She was restoring a family's legacy. Benjamin turned to leave, his step slow, as if the weight of the past was too much to carry all at once. "I'll be back," he said, pausing at the door. "Thank you, Tasha, for bringing him home, for bringing us both home." As the door closed behind him, Tasha stood in the silence of the shop, her heart full. She knew now that the Mustang was more than just a car. It was a bridge between past and present, loss and love, brokenness and healing. And she wasn't just fixing it. She was finding her own way home, too. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Tasha spent every waking moment in the shop, her hands moving with newfound purpose. The Mustang, once a forgotten relic, was slowly transforming. Each new part she installed, each inch of rust she scraped away, brought the car closer to life. But it wasn't just the car that was being restored, it was everything it represented. The bond between Caleb and his father, the years of memories, and the promise that had remained unfulfilled. Benjamin had come by a few more times, each visit a quiet act of redemption. He'd stand in the doorway of the shop, watching Tasha work, never saying much, but his presence was enough. He was finally ready to let go, ready to see the Mustang return to its former glory, even if that meant letting someone else finish what he and Caleb had started. Tasha, for her part, felt as though she was carrying the weight of both their dreams. She had come to see this project as her own, not just a job or a restoration, but a way to honor Caleb's legacy, and maybe even her own. She had always been the girl who fixed things, who put them back together. But now, with the Mustang, it felt like more than that. She was building something lasting, something that would live on long after the wrench turned and the engine roared to life. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the shop floor, Tasha stood in front of the Mustang, wiping her brow. She was almost done, just a few more tweaks to the engine, a little more work on the suspension. Then, it would be time to paint. She had decided on a color, a deep, metallic red. The kind of red that made your heart race just by looking at it. It wasn't just a color, it was a tribute. Caleb's words from the journal still echoed in her mind. Don't restore her to factory. Make her yours. She was doing just that. As she stood there, a familiar sound broke through the evening quiet, the sound of footsteps. Tasha turned, expecting to see one of the town's regulars dropping by for a repair, but instead, it was Benjamin. He was holding something in his hand, something small, wrapped in a faded piece of cloth. I brought you something, he said, his voice low, as if the weight of what he was about to do had finally caught up with him. Something that belonged to Caleb, I think. I think you should have it. Tasha took a step forward, her heart quickening. What is it? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Benjamin handed her the small bundle, his eyes soft. Caleb used to carry this around with him all the time, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It was always in his pocket, right next to his heart. Tasha carefully unwrapped the cloth, revealing a small, worn keychain. It was simple, just a metal tag, with Caleb's initials scratched into the surface. But it was more than just a keychain. It was a piece of Caleb's spirit, a reminder of the man he had been. I think he would have wanted you to have it, Benjamin said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. He trusted you, Tasha. He knew you'd be the one to finish what we started. Tasha's fingers closed around the keychain, the metal warm in her hand. She couldn't speak. The weight of Benjamin's words, the depth of his trust, flooded her all at once. This wasn't just about a car. This wasn't just about fixing something that had been broken. It was about restoring a life, a memory, a legacy. She looked up at Benjamin, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. I won't let you down. Benjamin smiled, a sad but proud smile. I know you won't, he said, then turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the shop. Tasha stood there for a moment, holding the keychain in her hand. She hadn't just been restoring a car. She had been restoring a family's history. Caleb's story had become part of her own, and in the process, she had found something she didn't even know she was searching for. A connection to Caleb, to Benjamin, and to the Mustang itself. As she looked at the car, its body now gleaming under the shop lights, Tasha knew that the restoration wasn't just about bringing the Mustang back to life. It was about bringing hope back to a place that had been filled with loss. It was about honoring Caleb's legacy, and in doing so, finding a piece of herself that had always been missing. The keychain felt like the final piece of the puzzle, proof that she wasn't just fixing the Mustang. She was finishing something that had started long before she had ever picked up a wrench. A legacy that would live on, not in metal and paint, but in the hearts of everyone who believed in it. The shop was quiet again, the hum of Tasha's work light, the only sound breaking the stillness. The Mustang sat before her, its body gleaming under the fluorescent lights, every surface polished, every detail attended to. It was nearly finished, just the paint, the final touch, and the roar of the engine to bring it to life. But Tasha had never felt a moment of such indecision in her life. The car was more than just a restoration project now. It had become a symbol of everything she had worked for, everything she had fought to understand. The bond between Caleb and his father, the legacy of love and loss that had carried the Mustang through the years, had been passed on to her, and now, the pressure to get it right, to finish it in a way that honored all that had come before, was overwhelming. As she stood there, staring at the car, her mind wandered back to the first day she'd seen it, the rusted, forgotten shell that had seemed like nothing more than a junkyard project. Now, it was a masterpiece, not just of metal and paint, but of memories. It wasn't just a car, it was a vessel for all the love, loss, and hope that had been poured into it, and she wasn't sure she could do it justice. The paint was the final step. She had chosen the color with care, Caleb's Rhodes red, the deep metallic cherry that he had envisioned. It wasn't just a color, it was a tribute. But now, as she stood there, brushes in hand, the weight of that decision pressed down on her. Tasha ran a hand through her hair, trying to shake off the doubt that had crept in. She had worked too hard, had invested too much, to let fear take over now. This wasn't just about the car. It was about finishing what Caleb had started, about taking something that had been broken and making it whole again. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. She turned, surprised to see Benjamin standing in the doorway. He hadn't been by in a few days, and Tasha hadn't expected him to come in tonight. But there he was, looking tired but content, his gaze landing on the Mustang as if he were seeing it for the first time. "You've done it," he said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "You've really done it." Tasha smiled, though the smile felt strained. "It's not done yet. Just need to finish the paint." Benjamin stepped into the shop, moving toward the car with a slow, deliberate pace. His fingers brushed the hood, lingering for a moment, as if the car was a memory he could touch, feel, and finally let go of. "I know you're nervous about the paint," Benjamin said, his voice gentle. "But you're doing exactly what Caleb would have wanted. You're making it yours, just like he wanted you to." Tasha took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling over her. She'd spent so much time focusing on getting the car perfect, on making it just right, that she had lost sight of why she was doing it. Caleb hadn't cared about perfection. He had cared about the love and intention behind every turn of the wrench, every stroke of the brush. "You're right," Tasha said, finally meeting Benjamin's eyes. "It's not about making it perfect. It's about honoring what came before. It's about finishing what Caleb and you started, and giving it the life it deserves." Benjamin nodded, his face softening. "I think Caleb would be proud of you. I know I am." Tasha smiled, the knot in her chest loosening. She walked over to the Mustang and picked up the paint sprayer, her hand steady now. The first spray of red hit the surface of the car, and it was like a spark of life shot through her. The deep cherry red spread across the Mustang like it had been waiting for this moment. The car seemed to come alive, the metallic sheen catching the light and shining with the promise of what was to come. Benjamin stepped back, watching silently, his hands in his pockets. "You've done more than restore a car," he said quietly. "You've restored a legacy." Tasha didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The sound of the paint sprayer, the deep red color spreading across the car, was all the answer she needed. This wasn't just a Mustang. It was a story of love, loss, and hope. One that she had become a part of. One that she had helped finish. As she stood back to admire her work, the Mustang now gleaming in its new coat of paint, Tasha felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. The car wasn't just a project anymore. It was a connection, a bridge between two generations, a way to bring something lost back to life. She had made it hers, just as Caleb had asked. And in doing so, she had found something she hadn't even realized she was looking for: a piece of herself, a sense of belonging, and a legacy she could call her own. The night before Tasha was set to start the engine for the first time, the garage seemed heavier than usual. The shadows stretched long across the concrete floor, and the silence felt suffocating, as though the weight of everything that had come before was bearing down on her. She had spent days, weeks, rebuilding the Mustang, turning it into something beautiful, something that had been lost but now, perhaps, could be found again. But tomorrow would be the true test. Tomorrow, she would start the engine. Would it roar to life? Or would the years of neglect have done too much damage? Would the Mustang, now gleaming in Caleb's red, become more than just a car? Or would it be a reminder of everything that was broken? Tasha sat on a stool in the corner of the shop, staring at the Mustang, her hands resting on her lap. The keychain Benjamin had given her was tucked safely into her pocket, its weight a constant reminder of what she had promised to do. She could almost feel Caleb's presence in the room, as though he were standing there beside her, watching her work, waiting for her to finish. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was getting late, but she knew sleep would not come tonight. She had worked tirelessly to get the Mustang ready, but now the anticipation was killing her. She couldn't stop thinking about that moment, when the engine would finally turn over, when the car would finally come to life. She stood up and walked toward the Mustang, her boots scraping against the concrete floor. She ran a hand over the hood, the surface now smooth and cool to the touch. The red paint gleamed in the low light, almost like it was glowing. She could still remember the day she had first laid eyes on it. The rust, the cracked windows, the flat tires. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the car, almost as if she were speaking to a friend. "Tomorrow, we see what we're made of." As she worked her way around the car, checking the final touches, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had restored the car, yes, but had she restored its soul? Had she given it the life it deserved? Or was she just another mechanic doing another job, forgetting the purpose behind the work? Her mind kept drifting back to Caleb's letter, the one he had written before he left. "Make her yours," he had said. But was she truly making the car hers? Or was she simply fixing something that had been broken for too long? Tasha paused in front of the engine, running her fingers over the metal, her heart pounding. She had put so much of herself into this car, so much of her energy, her hopes, her memories. She wasn't just finishing a project. She was completing a story that had been abandoned, left behind like the Mustang itself. She reached into the toolbox and pulled out the key, feeling the smooth metal in her hand. It was the same key that had once turned the ignition of the Mustang so many years ago. She slipped it into the ignition, the familiar click echoing in the shop. For a moment, everything was still. She exhaled slowly, her breath shaky. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath with her. Would it start? Would the Mustang finally come to life, just like Caleb and his father had dreamed? She turned the key. The engine sputtered. And then, like a voice from the past, the engine roared to life. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. The sound was music. It was the sound of life, the sound of hope. She hadn't just restored a car. She had restored a dream. Caleb's dream, Benjamin's dream, her own. The Mustang purred beneath her hands, the engine running smoothly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Tasha smiled, her eyes wet with tears she didn't bother to wipe away. She had done it. She had finished what Caleb had started, and in the process, she had found something she didn't even know she was looking for. She let the engine run for a moment longer, savoring the sound, letting it fill the shop. The Mustang was no longer just a car. It was a testament to love, to loss, to family, to memories long buried, and now it was alive again. Benjamin was right. This wasn't just about fixing a car. This was about restoring something much bigger than metal and paint. This was about honoring a legacy. Tasha took a deep breath, wiped the tears from her face, and turned the key off. The engine fell silent, but the Mustang's heartbeat still echoed in the shop, inside her chest. She hadn't just brought a car back to life. She had brought a family's story back to life. Tomorrow, the world would see the Mustang for what it was, a legacy restored, a promise fulfilled, and Tasha would stand proud, knowing that she had given it the life it deserved. The morning after the Mustang roared to life, the shop felt different. The air seemed to hum with a quiet energy, as though the car itself had brought something into the space, a presence, a pulse. It was no longer just a job for Tasha. The Mustang had become a reflection of everything she had fought for, everything she had given up, and everything she had learned along the way. She stood at the workbench, her hands still trembling slightly from the rush of last night's success. The engine had started, and the car had come to life in a way that felt almost spiritual. But now, the task at hand was to give the Mustang its final form, an identity. Caleb's identity. Benjamin's identity. Her own. Tasha wiped the sweat from her brow and turned to face the car, her eyes lingering on its gleaming red paint. The transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. What was once a forgotten relic of the past was now a masterpiece. But there was more to the Mustang than just the physical restoration. It was about the story, about remembering. The engine still hummed softly in the background, and Tasha's mind wandered back to the moments she had spent with the car, the late nights, the constant grind of tools, the connection to Caleb that had grown deeper with each passing day. She realized she hadn't just rebuilt a car. She had rebuilt herself. She had found her purpose in the rust and oil, in the pieces that had been discarded, and forgotten. And now, she was ready to give the Mustang to the world, to show everyone what it had become. But it wasn't just the car that needed to be shared. It was the story behind it, the legacy of a father and son, and the girl who had picked up where they had left off. The shop door creaked open, and Tasha looked up to see Benjamin standing there, his eyes immediately drawn to the Mustang. He had come by often over the past few weeks, watching as the car slowly took shape. But today, Tasha could see that something was different in his eyes. There was a peace there, something that hadn't been there before. He stepped into the shop, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. "It's finished," he said quietly, his voice almost reverent. Tasha nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She didn't need words. The car, now fully restored, spoke for itself. Benjamin walked around it slowly, his eyes tracing every detail. His fingers brushed the smooth paint, the curves of the body, the gleam of the chrome. When he reached the front, he paused and looked back at Tasha. "You've done it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've brought him home." Tasha's throat tightened. She had spent so much time focused on the mechanics of the car, on the physical restoration, that she had almost forgotten the emotional weight of it. This Mustang was more than just metal and paint. It was a memory, a bridge between a father and a son, between a family and a community. She walked over to Benjamin, her hands still trembling. "I didn't just restore the car," she said softly, her voice steady but filled with meaning. "I restored the legacy, Caleb's legacy." Benjamin smiled, his eyes shining with tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed until now. "And you've restored mine too," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure anyone could, but you did." For a long moment, they stood there together, silently acknowledging the weight of what had been accomplished. This wasn't just a car anymore. It was a symbol, a testament to resilience, to love, and to the power of restoring something broken. Not just metal, but hearts, lives, and memories. Finally, Tasha spoke again. "It's time to share it with the world. This car, it's not just mine. It belongs to Caleb, it belongs to you, and it belongs to anyone who believes in second chances." Benjamin nodded. "You're right. It's time." The two of them worked together to roll the Mustang out of the shop, the tires crunching over the gravel. As it rolled into the sunlight for the first time since its restoration, the car seemed to come alive, its red paint gleaming in the morning light, reflecting the hope and history it carried. For Tasha, it was more than just finishing a project. It was a moment of rebirth, not just for the Mustang, but for herself. She had restored a legacy, but in the process, she had found her place in it. The Mustang had not only carried the memories of Caleb and his father, it had carried her too. It had helped her discover who she was, who she could become, and the woman she was meant to be. And as they stood there together, watching the Mustang gleam in the light, Tasha knew that it wasn't just a car anymore. It was a story that had been completed. A story of love, loss, and the courage to rebuild. The end of one journey, and the beginning of another. The Mustang sat in the sunlight, its cherry red paint gleaming like a polished jewel. Tasha stood back, her hands on her hips, taking in the sight of her work, the culmination of months of labor, heartache, and determination. The car wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a symbol of what it meant to carry a legacy, to breathe life back into something that had been left behind, forgotten by time. Benjamin stood beside her, silent as he gazed at the Mustang, his eyes tracing the curves of the body, the shine of the chrome. For the first time in years, he looked at peace. He had always been connected to the car, but now, it felt as though the connection was more than just mechanical. It was emotional. This Mustang, once abandoned in a barn, now stood as a testament to his son's spirit, to the bond they had shared, and to the love that had never faded. "Caleb would have been proud," Benjamin murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Tasha didn't speak. She didn't need to. The Mustang, in its new form, spoke volumes more than any words ever could. It wasn't just a car. It was a rebirth. For Benjamin, for Caleb, and for Tasha herself. She had done what she set out to do. She had restored not just the car, but the connection to the past that had been broken. She had given Caleb's legacy the life it deserved, and in doing so, she had found something that had eluded her for so long, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. The Mustang wasn't just a project anymore. It was part of her story, and she was part of its. But there was more. Much more. The small town of Glenfield had always been quiet, a place where life moved slowly. But as word spread about the restoration, something had shifted. People came by, some with admiration, others with curiosity. They stood outside her shop, gazing at the Mustang with awe. Some even knew Caleb's story, had heard about the Mustang's long history. And now, they stood witness to its rebirth. The town that had once overlooked Tasha was now starting to take notice. And in their eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Respect. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip low in the sky, Tasha stood in front of the Mustang one last time. The shop was closing for the day, the tools put away, the engine cooled. But the work wasn't over. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She was a storyteller, a keeper of memories. And the Mustang was her canvas, her masterpiece. She turned to Benjamin, who was standing by the door, his hands in his pockets, watching her with a quiet pride. "I'm not done yet," she said, her voice steady, her gaze fixed on the car. "This isn't just about restoring cars. It's about restoring lives. It's about giving people something to believe in." Benjamin smiled, a soft but knowing smile. "I think you've done that, Tasha. You've done more than just fix a car. You've brought hope back." She nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time in a long while, Tasha felt like she had found her place in the world. The Mustang wasn't just a project. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that would continue to grow and evolve. The legacy she had restored wasn't just Caleb's. It was her own. As she stood there, the red Mustang gleaming in the fading light, Tasha knew that she was ready for whatever came next. She had built something from the ground up, not just a car, but a community, a family. She had restored a legacy, and in the process, she had built her own. The shop doors opened once more, and Tasha turned to see Leo, one of the young men she had taught how to work on cars, stepping inside. He had been with her from the beginning of the restoration, learning, helping, and watching as she breathed life into the Mustang. His eyes widened when he saw the car. It's amazing," he said, his voice filled with awe. Tasha smiled at him, her heart full. "It's not just about the car," she said softly. "It's about what we do with it, what we make of it, what we leave behind." Leo nodded, his eyes bright. "I get it now," he said. "It's more than just fixing things. It's about making them whole again." Tasha stood beside him, looking at the Mustang one last time before the sun set. It wasn't just a car. It was a legacy, and it was hers to carry forward. As the light faded and the shop fell silent, Tasha Evans stood tall, knowing that the work she had done had changed more than just the Mustang. It had changed her life, and it had changed the lives of everyone who had witnessed the car's rebirth. This was only the beginning.